all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into the Positive Head podcast, where you can always count on hearing fascinating discussions and interviews with the best and brightest consciousness change makers that are out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. And if you enjoy the Positive Head podcast, please be sure to follow us on iTunes by subscribing there, and also be sure to leave us a good review. In the podcast world, good reviews and subscribers on iTunes really are the holy grail. I mean, the more subscribers and good reviews you get, the more exposure you get. So if you love the show, or even just like it a little bit, please subscribe, give us a good review on iTunes. I assure you the support will be very much appreciated, and I'm confident the good karma gods will rain blessings down upon thee for doing so. Also, if you haven't been over to positivehead.com lately, we have some really cool new things going on. I'm super excited to announce the launch of our new line of t-shirts. Of course, we printed up the typical stuff you'd expect, Positive Head tees with our super cool Flower of Life inspired logo, but we also have some very unique tees that have what we call chemistry quotes written out on them. Now, if you're wondering what the heck a chemistry quote is, well, I won't spoil the surprise, actually. You'll just have to go over to the site, check them out for yourself. Also, I'm pleased to announce that this week's episode is the first Positive Head podcast episode to be sponsored by an outside company. This week's episode is sponsored by a brand new program called Procabulary. Procabulary is designed to help you improve what is arguably the most important tool you have to improve your life circumstances, your language. For those of you who have been listening to the Positive Head podcast since the very beginning, you've probably noticed that we haven't had any sponsors for the show as of yet, and there's a very good reason for that. The reason for that is that we were insistent on waiting to align with a sponsor that was offering a product that the Positive Head team really believed in. We really wanted to partner with a company that had a product that we could feel great about getting behind, and also feel really good about them getting behind us and acting as a sponsor for our show. Well, I'm happy to say that day has finally arrived with Procabulary. Procabulary truly is a brilliant language program that you can now enroll in at procabulary.org. I just personally completed the Procabulary Core Language Upgrade course a few days ago, and the great thing about it is that it only takes about 10 minutes a day, spanned over 21 days to complete. I personally found the minimum daily time requirement made it really easy to digest and assimilate the empowering information I was receiving each day. And if I had to define what I learned, I would say the Procabulary course material is designed to help you analyze and then reprogram the way you use your words and language to create your reality. I personally believe writing out words is called spelling for a very good reason. You're literally casting an energetic spell every time you open your mouth, which means it is of the utmost importance that you have a foundational understanding about the power or lack of power that the words you are choosing to use conjures up. I personally found the Core Language Upgrade coursework fascinating, extremely helpful, highly relevant to consciously creating the circumstances of my day-to-day life. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you know I'm constantly talking about how we all create our reality with our thoughts and words. Well, what Procabulary does is it actually provides you with an incredible, easy-to-follow roadmap that shows you how to go about reprogramming your language so that you can start getting better results in every aspect of your life. Now, as a Positive Head podcast listener, if you decide to go to procabulary.org and purchase any of their online courses, you'll get $50 off if you use the promo code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, on the checkout page. As far as which program I recommend, I personally recommend that everyone start with the beginner course. It's called Core Language Upgrade, and the retail price for that course is $299. I would say it's worth every penny after having just went through it. But of course, with the Positive Head promo code, it only costs you $249 after your discount. So once again, if you're interested in upgrading your language skills, head over to procabulary.org, use the Positive Head promo code to claim your $50 off. Now then, if you need a bit more convincing for this week's episode, I want to give you guys a sample of what I'm actually talking about with all this Procabulary stuff, which is why I'm really excited to announce that on this week's episode, I have Procabulary co-founder and language expert extraordinaire, Mark England, here with me. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. We've known each other for some time, actually. And just to kind of fill people in, I went to one of your workshops a little over a year ago. And at that time, I was so fascinated with the subject matter. And when I learned that you were coming out with this new online program that made it so much more accessible to, people all over the world, I knew I had to have you on the show. So I'm really excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for contacting me. And pleasure, man. I'm looking forward to this.
Likewise. So I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. Why don't you tell us all a little bit about yourself and what, of course, led you down the path of, perfecting and educating others on how to improve their relationship with language?
Okay, cool. Is this a good time, Brandon, to mention the synchronicity that we talked about earlier?
Hey, you know what? It's always a good time for synchronicity stories on my show.
It's true. Synchronicity is fascinating stuff. Okay, so here's one of the biggest synchronicities that I've experienced thus far in my life, which directly led me down the path of language and story creation, and also why we're having this conversation, this podcast right now.
Great.
I opened 2 emails from my 4.5 years at Radford University, 2 emails from career services. The first one was the first week of school. And for a variety of reasons, I have no idea what that one said. The second email that I opened was the last week of school. And for 4.5 years, I just deleted emails from career services. This one particular email, which had the same title as all the other ones, something said open it. Mm-hmm. So I opened it. And this is what happened. I look at the email and it says, teach English in Thailand. I stare at the screen. I look up at the ceiling for a long second. I look back down at the screen, read the headline again, look back up, look back down one more time, and make my decision. I'm gone. I'm leaving. I'm going to Thailand. Wow. I'd been involved in Thai boxing and mixed martial arts in college. I was competitive, and it was more important to me than my degree. I based my identity around being a mixed martial artist. Right. And so having an excuse, quote unquote, to go to Thailand and train was the swing vote. And my girlfriend, she was 3 semesters behind me. So I went back to Richmond, Virginia, and waited for her to graduate. I worked odd jobs and kept training and kept competing. We moved over there, Brandon, and to what was at the time my worst nightmare. Shortly after I got there, 3 months after I got there, I got hurt training. Oh, wow. And me in all my brilliance kept training. And I got hurt again. I did my knee twice over there. Had to have surgery. And the Thai doctor with a very thick Thai accent told me that my career as a kickboxer, as a fighter, was over. Wow. And that led me to becoming, in a very short amount of time, a bitter individual. And I lost my sense of humor. Have you ever done that, man? Have you ever lost your sense of humor for any amount of time?
Very briefly. I couldn't say for an extended period of time, but I've certainly fallen into grumpy fits. But I don't know if I could really say it lasted a long period of time. I normally will shake it, and I don't know how long you're talking about, but I would normally, maybe I'll be in a really foul mood for a day or two, and then I normally would come out of it. I've never had anything happen to me like my life revolves around mixed martial arts and then hearing, oh, guess what? This is over. This life is over. I've never had anything so traumatic. So yeah, it was, I know how long I went. I went 8 months. I went 8 months without laughing because I got into that space quickly.
And I was watching myself. I was like, man, this is really strange. I wasn't laughing. I was antisocial when we went out. I remember we went to we would go to a Cuban salsa dance club, and my girlfriend, diamond of a girl, inside and out. And I would watch these Cuban guys on the dance floor twirling her around, trying to take her out of the bar. And I was sitting at the bar drinking like a bitter old man, and I didn't care. And when that registered to me, that was the first significant shock that, hey, dude, you can do this. You can be this way for a decade or two or longer. And I was like, okay, that's a major, major world-class fail. I've got to change. So what I did is I decided I'm some dude from Richmond, Virginia. You know, my dad is a small business guy. My mom was a teacher, and I was brought up Southern Baptist. It's just, you know, average. And so I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, well, I'm in this physical body. I wonder what will happen if I begin to clean it up. So at the time, we went over there to teach English, and that was slave labor. We hustled, smiled, and got jobs at an American international school. So we were on an American calendar, American curriculum, 4 months paid vacation. It was a great gig. I was teaching kids sports. So it was one of my favorite jobs ever. So I had cash and I had time. I was like, okay, I had cash, time, and I had pain. So I was very motivated, right? So I was like, okay, well, what do I do? I heard through the grapevine about a health and detox facility down on the island of Koh Samui, which is an island in the Gulf of Thailand. And I was like, you know what? I'm going. I went, and they do intestinal, they do cleansing, they do fasting. People show up and they stop eating and they take detox pills and detox shakes, and it cleans everything out top to bottom. And people come away different. And also, your groups of people are going through this program at the same time. So you meet friends, you meet people that have been doing this every year for 20 years. It's how they stay recharged from the rat race, and they've got techniques and ideas and experiences to share. And my third time down there, I had an evening free, and I went and I watched this guy give a talk on emotional detoxification. What he did, he was talking about language. He was talking about words and stories and how we create perspective and how language can dictate perspective. I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. When it got fascinating is when he asked for a volunteer. This girl volunteered, and she had a story about her boyfriend who cheated on her at beach week and broke up with her in front of all of her friends. She was traumatized about it and was having issues about getting involved with another person, because every time she thought about getting together with going after a guy, or having a boyfriend, this old idea showed up in her mind and she flinched. In 7 minutes, he took her from a story that induced the anxiety cycle or a stress response, which included a lot of tears, bro. And in 7 minutes, he made key adjustments in her story, key adjustments to her word choice, and it shifted her perspective. And she was able to retell that same story with some key changes to it. And the story, her interpretation of what happened was now more accurate. Her reaction to her new interpretation was one of relaxation and empowerment. And I looked at that and I thought, man, I've got stories for years. How did you do this? Where do I go? And he gave me a website. He said there's an 81-page manual that you can download and start to apply to your own story. I went straight to the internet shop, downloaded it, and got to work. And about a year after that, I went and got trained in that specific system with the founder. And shortly after that, started coaching people. And I've been doing it full time for 10 years since.
Wow. That's incredible. Yeah, it's something when you start looking at how to clean yourself up, it's I don't know if I'd say it's more important. It's equally important which kind of garbage you're putting in your mind as what kind of garbage you're putting in your body. So if you're going to do it, you've got to do it all the way around. So I think that was very perceptive of you. And I remember when in your workshop, you doing a similar thing. We're bringing up a volunteer who would tell their story. And, I really resonated with it because without having all the technical insight that you have, I was very aware going in that, our life is the stories that we tell. And I've always been very, fortunate to, I guess, be, an eternal optimist and tell these great stories. And really, I believe at the end of the day, we're all sort of just making it up. And what you make up, in a sense, is what becomes your reality. And so when you add all this technical aspect to it that people like yourself, and it sounds like the guy that you first were kind of turned on to this work from, once you start looking at it through that technical lens, it brings some, I guess, grounding reality to it all, and something to grab onto.
1,000%, man. 1,000%. Education equals choice. And like I mentioned, I was a teacher before I got involved in this. I ended up teaching for 4 years at that particular school. I got a master's degree in international education. And what I continue to come back to is that when people have understanding, knowledge, education about certain patterns in their life, they inevitably have more choice. And like we mentioned before, that's the seed of empowerment. When give you an example. Saturday, I gave a workshop and went through the program, the explanation, and then got to the part where we do translations. And just like going from Japanese to German, we translate what we call conflict stories, which are made up of conflict language, into architect stories. It's made up of architect language. And a lot of the time, it's a few key word adjustments. Makes all the difference in the world. The conflict language, it creates and maintains the stress response. And architect language, it activates and maintains a relaxation response, and people change where they're breathing, change what they're envisioning, and in a very real sense, the direction of their life. This girl, she was having problems in her adult relationships, and she described how she gets paranoid and clingy, and she took her fist and she hit her chest a couple of times while she was describing this pattern. And I asked her, I said, "Where's the energy? Where's the sensation, the emotion that is involved in this pattern?" And she pointed to where she was pounding on her chest. And I said, "Okay, cool. When was the first time you felt that?" And she went straight to when her father would say he was going to come pick her up and he would be off somewhere else. And this is how she described the scenario. And keep in mind, she was 8. She used 3 sentences to describe the scenario. She said, "I'm all alone. Nobody cares about me. My father isn't here." Okay. So I'm thinking to myself, it's very rare that an 8-year-old will be completely on their own. And so I asked her, "Well, where were you?" And she said, "Well, I was at my mother's house." And I said, "Was your mother there?" And she said, "Oh, well, yeah." And I said, "Well, then were you alone?" And she says, "Well, actually, no, I wasn't alone." And there were some other people in the house. She had her brother and a couple of cousins. And so we made an adjustment to that first sentence. And so we put it in. I was at my mother's house, and there were people there. Next sentence. So I was at my mother's house. There were other people there. First sentence. Second sentence. Nobody cares about me. And notice that it's in present tense. And then the third sentence. My father wasn't there. Father isn't there. So the second sentence we looked at. Did anyone care about you? Did your mother care about you? Did your brothers and cousins care about you? Aunts? And what about your grandparents? Well, yeah, my grandparents, they all cared about me. So, okay, cool. So we took out nobody and put in plenty of people. So the first sentence, and I hope that you're following the tech Well, you've done the core language upgrade, so this is easy for you. I was
Yeah,
at my mother's
absolutely.
house, and there were people there. Plenty of people care about me, and my father, negation keyword isn't here. Okay, and when
Mhm.
a child uses that kind of language, she's going to make her father's actions about her. So what her mind is thinking at the rest of that sentence, my father isn't here, and it has something to do with me. She's taking it personally.
Right. Right.
And so I asked, okay, so if he wasn't there, where was he? Oh, well, he was at the bar. Okay, your father was at the bar because he was feeling what? And she stalled for a second, and she dropped her head a little bit, and she said, well, he felt like a failure. I said, put that in. So her original statement, which constricted her breathing, created a worst case scenario in her mind and caused her a lot of stress, and was one of the driving preconceived notions behind her problems she was having in her adult relationships. It started with this: I'm all alone. Nobody cares about me. My father isn't here. That's the conflict story, story A. And we went to story B, which is an architect story, which is more accurate. Okay,
And
we're
empowering, right?
very much so, very much so. So I'm at my mother's house. There are people here. Plenty of people care about me, and my father was at the bar because he felt like a failure. Okay, that instantly brought her. She could see the situation. She changed her interpretation of the situation, and it
Very
came down
much
to the
so.
language that she used. Um, yeah, and that's what we do in Procabulary. We help people understand how their language influences them, how their language influences their imagination, their feelings, their physicality, and their breathing.
Yeah.
And when people have a choice between a punch to the nose or a massage, most people are going to take a massage, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things that you talk about that I found really fascinating that this makes me think of is, you talk about using language or words as spelling, as casting a spell. And you even talk about
Yes,
the meaning of the word abracadabra. Maybe share a little bit of that.
absolutely. So it's in almost, and I've given 351 professional presentations to date. In almost every one of those presentations, because it's such an easy segue, Brandon, into our words and our stories. Everybody's heard of abracadabra. And so I say, when I say abracadabra, what do you think of? Just like that. Everybody goes to magic. Some people
Yeah.
say Steve Miller or rabbits and hats, which is still magical connotations. Abracadabra,
Right.
and I invite all of your listeners to look this up. It's cool. Abracadabra literally translates. Well, it's Aramaic, okay,
Hmm.
and Aramaic is one of the two languages Jesus spoke. He spoke Aramaic and he spoke Hebrew. And Aramaic
Hmm.
is the language that the first Old Testament was written in. And abracadabra translates to "with my word I influence," or "with my word I create." And I will
Yeah.
remember to the end of days the dinner that I had with a group of friends. This guy knew I was in the language, one of the guys at the table, and he asked me that same question. He said, "Hey, Mark, you know what abracadabra means?" And I said in a very uninterested tone, I said, "Yeah, magic." And kept on eating. And he told me that story. Man,
Yeah.
that guy had my attention like on a dime. And and yeah, so let's look at that. Here's another. This is such a profound example that I end up sharing it a lot. I was coaching a young guy about his career, and this is what he said, and this is what he did. He said, "Mark, I can't keep focusing on my past." And he turned around and looked behind him really, really fast, and then looked back at me. And we were in two chairs facing each other. I, of course, saw him turn around and look behind him. He didn't. He missed it.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. And so I asked him, I was like, you just turned around and looked behind you. And he was like, what? And I said, yeah, dude, you did. And then I asked, I was like, well, did you see anything? What were you envisioning? And he had to stop and think about it. said, wow, I saw myself in chains. So with his
Wow.
language, he was influencing. What was he influencing? He was absolutely influencing his imagination. I can't keep focusing on my past. When I say that, if I ever say that, guess what I'm going to force myself to focus on? My past.
Right.
And that's what he did with himself. He saw him, he literally turned around. So he influenced his imagination, he influenced his physical body unconsciously, and he definitely influenced his emotions. He was very frustrated and angry at himself. Um, yeah, and abracadabra, fascinating. That takes us to spells. This is Webster's definition of a spell. The definition of a spell is a word or a combination of words of great influence.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think people really realize a lot of times how sensitive we all are. We're these vibrational, energetic beings, and every word, we're constantly affected by everything energetically. And when you start looking at these spells that we're casting with these words that we're using, they all have a vibrational, component to them. And if you're using words that are disempowering, that are conflict language, as you put it, then you're going to feel the energetic repercussions of you're calling forth the vibration of conflict, or can't, or won't, or all these sort of negations and so forth. It's incredible that we've kind of missed it in realizing how important this element is. And once you start paying attention, that's when it really gets to be almost comical in a sense, when you can catch how much you're using this conflict language. I mean, you have to laugh to keep from crying, right?
Yeah, man.
Because we're all constantly using these, and I'll let you speak on it more. You have key words for it all, which really helps to break it down. Negations versus affirmations, or soft talk versus solid talk, and projections versus reflection. So, I know there's kind of a lot to this, really, as we are going to do our best to explain some of it, and ultimately they need to go to procabulary.org and take the course. I mean, that's the most succinct, best way. But what we're going to do here is our best between our open dialogue to give people a taste of how you can really start to organize your thoughts surrounding, the magic, the spells that you're casting in your own to create your reality. And I love how it ties into, I constantly am talking about creating your reality, and, life is magic. And this is such a great way to bring some grounding to it.
Wonderful. Yeah, very well said, Brandon. And I'm very happy to share the tech, the language tech, the technical knowledge, the knowledge of technique of vocabulary systems. And whoever listens to this, the podcast, whether they go to the website or not, they will benefit from our dialogue today. And I'll also focus in at the end of the tech breakdown, the language tech breakdown. I'll focus in on one word that they can use today, especially in emails. That's what we find. So vocabulary does very well in yoga circles because we've mapped the relationship between conflict language and breath response. And we also do very well in corporate environments. Okay. And when we're working in corporate environments and coaching teams of people in organizations, we tell them that the easiest way and the fastest way that they can put these techniques and understandings to practice is in emails, because there's a lag time. I can write my email out and look at what I've written and then ask myself, what is the person that's going to receive this? What are they going to imagine? How are they going to feel? How is this code for another, in a very real sense, how's it going to influence what they envision? And is that what I want? Okay, so we'll start with the foundational vocabulary breakdown. We'll start with the words to reality thought model. So this is the vocabulary thought model, and it's super easy.
Okay.
Words create our stories, and our stories shape our realities. Okay, and you can use in parentheses perspectives. Okay, so words to stories stories to realities. So let's use that gentleman I talked about a second ago. Let's plug his words into the vocabulary thought model. His words, I can't keep focusing on my past. What kind of stories are those words going to build, Brandon? I mean, then take a guess and you will get close.
Well, the statement itself seems to be problematic in his mind. So my guess would be he's going to focus on problematic stories from his past, things that bring him conflict or problems.
Exactly. It's going to be more of the same. It's the thought train analogy is very accurate. So we latch on to an idea, a particular sentence, some words, and then there's a car after that, and then a car after that, and then another thought after that, and then he's wallowing in a particular story for a weekend or a week or a month or longer. I mean, people can focus their perspective. I've done it. They can focus and maintain a perspective on why everything is awful in their life for long periods of time. And we reap what we sow. And so what we did with that young man, we did a translation. We went from negation, I can't keep focusing on my past, to affirmation. We took out the can't and put in can. And automatically that changes the rest of the sentence. So he went from I can't keep focusing on my past to I can focus on my future.
Right.
And so we changed the words, we changed his stories, we changed his perspective. He was looking forward now. And everything else followed suit. How he was breathing and feeling. And that's the definition of a spell. So there are three components of conflict language. And then there's three components of architect language. We'll make this very simple. The three components of conflict language are negations, projections, and soft talk. So negations, everybody's heard them. Can'ts, won'ts, isn'ts, haven'ts, nots, shouldn'ts, don'ts. I don't like it when you treat me that way. Okay. I won't spend all my money. I just made a picture of that person treating me that way again, and I made a picture of me spending all my money. So it definitely influences my imagination and everything else. So
it's drumming up the vibration of that experience, which in my view of the world, and I believe yours probably as well, is if you're drumming up that vibration, it's like calling it forth into your experience. It's like asking for more of it.
That's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it does. And the opposite of that, affirmation, cans, will, is, has, have, does. Those words influence me in a very different way and develop my perspective in also a very different way. So we have negations and then affirmations. The second component of conflict language are projections. Projection keywords. You, he, she, they, someone's first name, mom, dad. My mother's always trying to control me. Projection.
So much of that goes on out there. I mean, when you think about projections, it's like people are projecting all the time.
For sure. And what projections do quite reliably is that they create victim perpetrator mental imagery. So woman came in and she said, my husband ruined my relationship with my mother. Okay. So, and we'll go into this. So this is what she did. I'll share the whole thing. This is a fun podcast to do it. She came in, she sat down. She said, my husband ruined my relationship with my mother. He wouldn't let me see my friends, and he kept me stoned all day long. Yeah, right. Of course, that was one of my favorite projections of all times.
I'm not sure if she was happy about that one or not.
At one point in time, I bet she was happy about thinking that. And then after the divorce, she was upset because. So I asked her, I was like, well, how did he do it? And she just looked at me funny. And I said, no, really, how did he keep you stoned all day long? And she said, okay, well, I see where you're going with this. And so we took out the he and put in I.
Right.
And that is the key reflection word. So the opposite of a projection is a reflection. What happens when I walk into the bathroom and I look at myself in the mirror? What do I see? I see my reflection. And so what we're very interested in doing for the sake of people's personal empowerment and developing their a healthy perspective of how much influence they have in their life and can continue to have in their life. We take out the projection keywords. We take out the he's. We take out the she's. We take out the moms. We take out the dads. We take out my husbands. My husband kept me stoned all day long. Took that out. Put in I. I kept me stoned all day long. That was a much more accurate assessment of who was keeping her stoned. And from there, the rest of her projection stories began to unravel. And she was very happy about that. She was stressing herself out with these chronic projection words and stories, and her reality was one of stress and anxiety. She was in Thailand, and she had been separated from her husband for 3 years, and he was in the UK. So, yeah, very accurate. Wherever we go, there we are. We take our stories with us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy to start blaming someone else for all the issues. It's such, it's the most disempowering thing you can do. This is happening to me because of them. Instead of focusing on what I have or haven't done or where I have control and power, it's just constantly focusing on where I'm disempowered in that perspective. And it really, that's one that, going through the course really hit me the hardest. It's like, man, the amount of people that are projecting all day, every day and don't even realize how much they're disempowering themselves instead of looking at what they can do and what they do have control over.
Absolutely. And in a very real sense, this is simply an education issue. I often ask people in workshops and seminars, raise your hand if you had any classes at all that went into how your language influences your imaginations, your feelings, your emotions, your physicality, and your breath response. And I've had 4 people raise their hand that were able to give an accurate description of that. And those were coming from alternative schools, Steiner schools, Waldorf schools, Montessori schools. So what does that mean, man? What that means is that the vast majority of people's education about their language comes down to strict grammar and spelling. Yeah. I mean, it was as much of a law as math for me in school. You spell the words this way, and this is how you spell them. Mark, you have zero say in the matter. Yeah. And guess what? This is how you're going to combine them, because this is how we've learned. This is how we're taught to combine them, and this is how I learned to combine them, grammar, and this is how you're going to learn to combine them. These are the rules, and the rules are solid. And our language there's a whole other realm of life to our words than grammar and spelling.
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, this is so much more important. If I misspell a word, that's not nearly as important as if I've living my whole life projecting, using negations, and have no even perception that what I'm doing is creating all the pain and turmoil in my life.
Absolutely.
Now, the other thing that you talk about is one of the language components is soft talk and solid talk. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. And I'm giggling on this because on the surface it looks, okay, well, I can see the point. And then when we scratch a little bit, I was having this conversation last night at dinner. Soft talk it's lethal. So, soft talk. What are the soft talk keywords? Likes, maybes, I thinks, probablys, could be's. It's almost like I am's. So, well, maybe I could go to yoga class more often. When I say that, what am I very, very, very likely not going to do?
Yoga.
What am I very likely to do? Whatever I'm doing at that moment, or whatever I'm used to doing. It's almost like I'm procrastinating, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of I am procrastinating. And so what we do with soft talk, another interesting aspect of soft talk is that it creates a second identity. It's almost like, or I think I am a little upset about what happened. I think there's two I's in that sentence. And so what we do is we place, when I use that language model, I place some of the responsibility for what I'm thinking and feeling and eventually acting upon, doing on that second I. I think I am a little bit upset, as opposed to I am a little bit upset, as opposed to I'm upset.
Right.
Okay. And here's where it gets weird. Soft talk, when we go from soft talk to solid talk, it forces an issue. And when something is true or false, then we have to take action upon that information. And taking action brings up a variety of fears in people: fear of failure, fear of making the wrong choice, fear of looking stupid, fear of being judged. So if I push away confronting myself with very real possibilities and probabilities in my life, then I can put off making a decision. If I put off making a decision, then I, in one sense, think I'm safer. When in reality, indecision creates paralysis in people and an incredible amount of stress. And soft talk showed up to date, I've done well over 3,000 private coaching sessions. Soft talk showed up, played a major role in how the actual language, the syntax of the language of how people were terrorizing themselves with particular ideas and concepts, opinions. It showed up chronically, which is why it made the top three. Those three language patterns, which make up conflict language: negations, can'ts, won'ts, don'ts, isn't, shouldn'ts; projections, you ruined my life, he won't let me do what I really want to do, my mother's always trying to control me, they don't ever give me any respect; projections and soft talk. I think I might change my life one day, maybe. Those are the three language components that people use to script 90%, and that's a low number, of their personal nightmare stories.
Wow. It's an incredible thing to realize and to really take in, because it explains so much. And I think with soft talk, it's an interesting point that you bring up. That's one that all of us tend to do. It's like it's almost like avoiding conflict or avoiding, like you said, making a decision. It's like procrastination's best friend. To use soft talk.
Yes, well said.
And a lot of, I think one of the things you point out is you use a lot of ambiguous statements when you're using soft talk in the program. I remember that. And I think at one point you even say, I think off the table, the words I think should just don't even use them. Like, decide what it is going to be and state it. Use consider. I believe you use the word consider instead of think, if I'm remembering correctly.
It's a more present word to use. It keeps people, it's a more sincere word.
Right.
Think versus consider. When I'm considering something, if someone's considerate to me, that comes across. It comes across in how they speak to me. It comes across in how I receive what they're saying to me. And think is an overused word. It's an overused word.
It is used a lot. I know I use it a lot. So this is one that definitely hit home with me, is the whole soft talk thing, because as much as I'm a fan of words and use words all the time, to create my reality, and obviously doing a podcast, I'm someone who's very fond of speaking and talking and using words. I definitely became aware of my use of soft talk after going through your course. And so now it's one of these things where sometimes you definitely are catching it more and more. I'll catch myself in the middle of it and being like, oh, this is like, and you can feel, and when you're in the middle of using soft talk or a negation or a projection, if you pay attention to the way you're feeling, you feel disempowered, you feel weak, your body language is changing. And you talk a lot about, breathing and how that kind of plays into all that. And I think that's really, really fascinating as well. Maybe you can speak a little bit more about what happens with the breath when you're doing these different things.
Love to. Let's start with a statistic. This is coming from the CDC, Centers for Disease Control. And they have studied and estimate that 95% of doctors' visits are stress related.
Wow. That's an incredible statistic.
It's an incredible statistic. And our breathing is part of the quote unquote problem, and it's definitely part of the solution. Conflict, and we have language. We have language to describe how our breathing is influenced by our language, or we have language to describe that our breathing responds to our stories. And so we'll say, let's clear the air. Of course, you've heard that before, right, Brennan?
Sure.
So what air are we talking about specifically? Like the air in the closet or the air in my tires? No, the air in my lungs.
Right.
Let me get this off my chest.
Right.
Cool. Get what off my chest? Pressure, tension, tightness. And then when we do, we take a sigh of what? A sigh of relief.
Absolutely.
A sigh of relief of what? Pressure, tension, and tightness. Conflict language activates and maintains sympathetic nervous system response in people's bodies. And that's also known as fight, flight, or freeze response. And vast majority of time, it's freeze response. And what freezes up? My breathing. And the breathing is my breath. When I use conflict language, I activate that stress response. My breathing is locked in the upper part of my torso, which is known as shallow breathing or labored breathing or coastal breathing. Have you ever watched a baby breathe, Brandon?
I'm sure I have at some point.
Yeah, man. Where are they breathing? They're breathing into their stomach.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also, if any of your listeners have watched someone pass over, watched someone die, where are they breathing? Very likely they're breathing in the upper part of their body.
Yeah.
And so we have mapped out the relationship between our language and our breath response. And 100% of the time when we do translations, people take sighs of relief upon sigh of relief. And their body language it follows suit. They start to relax into themselves and they start breathing into their abdomen, which, like we were talking about earlier, that is so people are very interested, and rightfully so, in presence, being present and aware, being in the moment. So when I'm in the moment, this is a great earmark for myself and other people that are interested in that. When I'm in the present moment, when I'm here, where am I breathing? I'm breathing into my stomach. I'm breathing into my abdomen. So, one, we can go ahead and begin to habituate, learn, and practice breathing into our stomach, and we'll be much more present for that. And we can also use our story to help keep our breath down there.
Right.
And so when I shorten up a story and translate it from conflict language to architect language, I get that response amongst a variety of other beneficial responses. My breathing relaxes into parasympathetic nervous system response. It goes down into my abdomen. And
so
from
can
there,
you use, I'm sorry,
go
quick
ahead.
question. Can you use breath to get yourself into a more positive, using, I guess, affirmations or solid talk or reflections? It's kind of like we're talking here. If you're if you're using negations and soft talk and projections, you're shallow breathing. If you're using affirmation, solid talk and reflections, you've got this deeper abdomen breathing. So would it be safe to say if you aren't even focusing on your words as much, but focusing on your breathing and even your body language, you hear that as well, sitting up straight with your chest out as opposed to, hunched over and in a smaller kind of, negative body language. Do they work both ways? I don't know if you fully follow what I'm saying. Can you use one?
I fully follow what you're saying. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. They're feedback loops. So
exactly,
breathing into my stomach, into my abdomen, and placing and using my body, putting my body in a certain position, whether it's seated or standing, empowering positions makes it a lot easier for me to stay out of what was me stories and practice architect language. And
right.
Architect language makes it easier for me to breathe into my stomach and act accordingly. So it really is. It's an infinity loop. It's an infinity loop.
It's fascinating. Now,
what was your favorite thing about the core language upgrade, Brandon?
Well, for me,
what was your big takeaway?
My big takeaway was, I'm such a fan of talking about energy and, how we're all just telling a story. I say it all the time. I've told a story my whole life about creating a successful, business, like successful company and successful,
nice.
Everything that I've done, it's honestly, and I say it all the time to people, I just made it up. I just made up stories and would tell them no matter what was happening. I'm living on a friend's couch. Oh, I'm going to be very successful one day. You just watch. And here's how. And I'm drumming up that energy, drumming up that vibration,
nice.
drumming up that feeling. And it's something that what I love about this, I love anything that comes and brings a technical aspect to help to describe my craziness, because it's necessary. Not everyone thinks
more like
me.
Genius.
Yeah. Well, they say there's a borderline between genius and insanity. So I think I walked that fence nicely. So my greatest takeaway was you're giving me some really hardcore things to grab onto, to some technical stuff to say, hey, here's the technical information that is backing this up. And I think that's really, really important to get through to everyone, because some people will really resonate with my style and delivery and the way I talk about creating your reality. And others are, going to resonate much more so with these, very technical, hardcore way of looking at it that I think it's important to be well-rounded. So that is, I don't know if that's a really is defined of an answer as you'd like, but that's what I loved about it is that it gives me something really solid to point to. As if I am ever coming up against someone who's kind of, okay, this is too in the head in the clouds kind of stuff that you're talking about, I can say, yep, okay, go do vocabulary, please. And this will help you to understand how you're creating your reality. Here's proof that you're creating your reality by drumming up the vibration of the words that you're using and the things that you're resonating with, the stories that you're resonating with. Because that's a really big one for me is, we're all just telling stories, and so many people are focusing on bad stories. And if you just will make up good stories long enough and keep resonating with the energy of those stories, my wholehearted belief is the universe it's the way it works. It's the way law of attraction works. We don't have to understand it to be affected by it. Just like I don't have to understand how law of gravity works, but if I walk off the edge of a cliff, I'm going to feel the effects. I believe the exact same thing. You don't need to understand how law of attraction works, but it's a real force, and here's a way that you can use it to attract more of what you want to see into your movie, your story. So yeah, that's what I love about it. I feel like it's very complementary to all the things that I constantly talk about.
Nice, man. We had 2 child psychologists go through the program, and what they said, it was, I loved it. One of the girls, one of the doctors, she said, "You guys did an excellent job of not pathologizing the schema." And what she meant by that in layman's terms is that anyone can understand this.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's very, very simple. And what I love about the course, because it's a lot, it can be kind of a lot to take in. Like a lot of things, it's very simple on one hand, and another, probably people are listening and saying, "Okay, hold on, what am I doing? Which one's projection? Which one's reflection?" And there, you may want to even take notes. Of course, you can always listen back to the podcast again. But I think ultimately, going and signing up for the course and going through it, and you have at the end of each lesson, you have a daily lesson for 3 weeks, but they're very short each day, which I thought was really, really good. And then you're then cementing the information in your brain with a little quiz at the end of each day. And so I think that's really important, is to focus attention on it for some period of time. What is it they say? It's 21 days or something to really start a new habit. So I don't know if you did that by design, but I think it's a really great structure. Yeah. Yeah.
We were, to use one of my words that I referenced earlier, we were extremely considerate about who was going to take this program. And anyone that is, same thing with your podcast. People are going to sit down and listen to your podcast and contemplate what you're saying. They're proactive people by nature. Yeah. And proactive people tend to be busy. And so we thought about that. We're like, okay, how do we make this information extremely palatable, digestible, applicable, and content and delivery? And as far as the delivery is concerned, we're like, okay, do short videos. So each day is a 5-minute video, and a short, quick, fun quiz that anchors in the main points of the video, and then 3 thought-provoking questions. Most people are done in 10 minutes. People that take their time, 15.
Yeah, and that's what I loved about it. I mean, 10 minutes is, people have such a short attention span these days. So giving them 10-minute clips a day over a long, 3-week time period, I thought was a really smart way to structure the course.
Brandon, is this a good time to share a specific word for your listeners to keep their eyes open for?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll lead in with a story. I've had this happen to me so many times. I've stopped counting, and likely your listeners have too. So a friend gets a new car, and it's a white Camaro, and then all of a sudden I start seeing white Camaros everywhere.
Right.
Or somebody starts talking about taking a vacation to Italy, and then I notice an information booth at my local supermarket about vacationing in Rome, which is actually been there the whole time. I just missed it.
Yeah.
We have you ever done that, Brandon?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Most people have. And in reality, we're all doing it. We have a piece of hardware in our brain. It's at the base of the spine. And it's called the Reticular Activating System, or RAS for short. And this piece of material, it's a thin little coating, really. Once it gets tuned, once it gets programmed to see something or look out for something, then it starts to find examples of that everywhere. So the person with the new Camaro, those white Camaros were there the whole time. I'm now more focused on it, and so I start to pick it up. And this also goes for why motorcyclists chronically complain about cars pulling out right in front of them. People, when they get their driver's license, they spend a majority of their time focusing and looking for other cars. And when a motorcycle shows up, their RAS, because it's not a car, literally edits it out. Edits it out. I've got a couple of people that I know that think everyone is out to get them. And they will walk into a situation and project that idea onto people that are really neutral to positive. And what's gone on is that they have repeated victim stories to a degree where their RAS gets programmed to look out for those particular kinds of scenarios and edit out and dismiss people that are there simply because they want to spend time with them or could quite literally add a lot of value to their life. They edit those people out just like people edit out motorcycles when they're looking for cars. It's the exact same scenario. It's the exact same hardware. So what we'll do is we'll use that to our advantage to pay more attention to the negation keyword but.
What? Yeah.
But.
That's a
very interesting negation. Yes, quite commonly used, and it's got some very interesting implications. So someone comes up to me and they said, Mark, I really respect your opinion, but
the hammer falls.
Right? What happens? What happens? I negate what they said before, and I'm expecting, I do exercises with this in workshops. You've done a good job, but I really respect your opinion, but I know you're really busy, but my personal favorite, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm going to. Yeah, exactly. I'm about to. Or more accurately said, I'm gonna attempt to help you hurt yours, unconsciously, most likely.
Right.
Yeah, and so we go through the drill of using and instead of but. And after this short conversation, people will be more attuned to pick it up, listen to it. You'll hear it everywhere. Look for it in your emails, and you'll have plenty of opportunities to replace the buts with the and. So I really respect your opinion, and we need to improve these areas of what you're doing. And what it does is
it's such a different feeling. I mean, just hearing it.
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive. It levels the playing field.
I love about this so much is you really, just getting back to what did I like about the program so much? It's paying attention to how differently I feel when you improve the way something's being said, when you get rid of the negations, or you're using solid talk instead of soft talk. It's just like it really drives home. And I think I said it earlier, but I can't stress it enough how important it is from my perspective, the feeling that comes along with every little word. I don't think people really are paying that close attention to how we're really being taken on a roller coaster ride all the time with words. Each word but gives me a totally different feeling in my energy field than and. And it's something no one's really paying attention to. And imagine if we all started paying attention to this and really focusing on improving our language individually and collectively, the different experiences we would create.
Yeah, we would create different experiences. We would definitely create different stories. We would create different realities, and a lot of what is deemed as social ills would begin to dissolve and evaporate, and hocus pocus, abracadabra, would literally start to disappear. It would start to disappear. Right. We would literally begin to ignore it because our RAS systems, our reticular activating systems, would begin to focus on other things, more harmonious things. And from there, that's the direction people like yourself are going in. People that listen to your podcast are going in. People that stop and think and contemplate about what they're eating and how they're communicating and how they're sleeping, what they're driving. All the different ways, because at the end of the day, it really is. It's just about potential.
Yeah,
it's about potential. Okay, yes, these problems have been going on for how long? Who's involved? Okay, great. Where are we going? The first thing my driving teacher told me when I got in the car, I said, "Look where you're going to go, because you're probably going to go there." And that's what you were doing on the couch. You were using your language to look where you're going to go. You just pointed that one flashlight in any one of those 360 degrees around you. You would have gotten a different picture at each one of them, and you chose, okay, I'm going where I want to feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is just yet another example of talking about this RAS system acting as a real-time editor. It's another great example of bringing some science to all this creating your reality stuff, because, I always think of the example Mother Teresa, Nobel Prize winner and humanitarian, everyone's familiar with, or most people, I'm sure. She's asked in the 60s to join a march against the war in Vietnam, and she said, no, I can't do that. But if you have a march for peace, I'll be there. And it's understanding that, hey, what I'm focusing on, what I'm giving energy to, I'm creating more of. And the best thing that you can do is to start editing out the things that you don't want to see, and focusing your energy, because, let's face it, there's so much information flooding us at all times. We can only process so much of it. We might as well focus on what we want to see more of. So I really love this RAS, example, because, like I said, yet again, it ties in. Here's some science behind why you want to put your attention on, where attention goes, energy flows. Put attention on what you want to see more of. And if you don't like something, I believe the best thing you can do is give it no attention. And so many people get caught up on drumming up here's what's wrong with the world. Here's what's wrong. Here's what's wrong. Yeah, we could talk for eternity about what's wrong. Let's take our precious energy and put it on what's right, what we want to see more of.
Amen.
And I think that ties into this.
Where's my leverage? Where's my leverage? A large part of my leverage is in my community, in my social circles. So, is it? Am I shaking my fist in the air at the big picture problems?
Yeah,
I've done it. I've definitely done it.
We all have.
And I find I get a much better result from myself and my immediate environment when I focus on enjoying and celebrating and developing my smaller social circles, my community, people that are right in front of me. That's where the rubber meets the road. It's not on CNN.
Yeah. Well, you talked about it, in the course, clearing everyone out of your head, so there's only room for one story, yours.
Yes.
And I think that is such a It really simplifies and empowers an individual. Imagine if everyone started doing that.
Exactly. Like I mentioned before, I'm an MMA, big MMA fan. It's the only sport I follow. I can relate to it. I can relate to the highs and the lows that the fighters go through.
Yeah.
And an hour before before we did this podcast, I watched a 12-minute video of Nick Diaz, who's one of the best 170 pounders in the world. Sometimes he does 185, but anyway, he's great, man. Great fighter, controversial fighter. And the guy's a marijuana smoker. And he's failed 3 drug tests. The last drug test that he failed was questionable. Anyway, he gets a 5-year suspension.
Holy moly.
Yes, he's 32. So that takes him to the edge of his
career
window.
Yeah.
And I watched a video of him right after he came out of the NAS, with that North Nevada State Athletic Commission, NSAC, after he came out of his hearing. And man, that guy, he was, of course he was upset, and he was spraying projections.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, that is going to sting. He's going to sting himself as long as he maintains that, because his language was dictating his perspective. And I broke my business partner, Adam, who is an amazing guy, genius, funny dude, wears multiple hats like a king. And is a massive part of vocabulary. My hat's off to that guy.
Cool.
And he'd be a very interesting guy to have on the podcast, because he comes at this from a very different angle, similar and different, and beneficial. So a follow-up podcast, it would be cool, man. The guy's sharp.
To do that.
I sent him the SMS or the link to Nick Diaz's interview, and pointed out, like I really needed to point out, because creative vocabulary. Adam gets the whole projection thing. I was like, man, check out his language. And you know what? I really felt for the guy. And we do that. We do that until we don't. I do that until I don't. I've done that until I've stopped. I've created massive victim projection stories. And eventually I, thank God or thank whatever, caught on to it. I'm like, wait a minute. Is this the only way that I can see this scenario? Is this the only way I can see myself? I've got options here. And we all have options here. And everybody listen to this. We have options. And yeah. So
just because you've told the story and lived from a certain perspective, every moment is another chance to turn it all around. And I think that's a key thing. People sometimes feel like, oh, it's too late for me. I've been doing this so long. How could I ever snap myself out of it? And it's, once again, they're casting a spell with that thought, right? Oh, it's too late for me. How could I ever snap myself out of it? I can't. Okay. And so you can't. Henry Ford, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. So I think that's
right there, man.
Really important that people understand that everything is always leading them to the next. It's always an opportunity around the corner. So this is such a wonderful opportunity, and this has been really, really great. Kind of digging in with you here. A couple other things I would like to ask before we sign off here. One of the things you talk about is the kindness translation at the very end, which I found really fascinating. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Kindness translation is special. So it goes into an element of conflict language, and then as an act of kindness, I will continue to feel a certain way or think a certain way. And what it does is it highlights the ridiculousness of my motives. So Stephen and his family are going through a really rough time. And so there's the story, and we identify our feelings, and I'm feeling really upset about it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we identify the story, we identify the feelings, and then we put as an act of kindness in between. So Stephen and his family are going through a really rough time, and as an act of kindness, I'm going to feel bad for them.
It instantly makes you realize how ludicrous your perspective is. Yeah,
exactly. Instead of as an act, it helps me check my position,
right,
and how I'm approaching this, and what am I really adding to? I mean, can I feel bad enough to help Stephen and his family feel better? That's another way of talking about the kindness translation. And so. Okay, Stephen and his family are going through a really rough time, and as an act of kindness, I'm going to bake an incredible meal for them with plenty for leftovers, have them over, take their mind off of whatever they're going through, and help them celebrate a little bit of their life. That's a much more accurate match.
Absolutely. There's kindness in there that actually benefits someone.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you talk a little bit about, you give an example. You said something to the effect of, did you see what happened to those people lost at sea? And you kind of talk about in the one of the courses, stay uninvolved with bad feeling stories if there's nothing you can do about it.
Amen.
I thought that was a really great point, because how often are people, I think of talking to my mother about what she saw on the news. Did you hear about this awful story? And, and meanwhile, there's nothing Burma, that they can do.
Yeah, exactly. In Burma, or some other, what can I do? What can I do? And that's one of the interesting aspects about the news. And more and more people are going to different outlets,
alternative
to get
outlets,
information and news, because people are catching on to that. Guess what I put into my mind influences how I feel. So the old model was, let me watch the news, let me pay attention to a myriad of things that I have zero influence in, and in between those horror stories, let me watch advertisements for stuff that I can buy that will help placate my feelings of misery.
Right. Yeah. It's wild when you really think about it.
You know what? It's funny too. Charlie Chaplin said that life viewed under a microscope is a tragedy. Life viewed life viewed from afar is a comedy.
Right.
It's a comedy. And talking about my sense of humor, I lost my sense of humor at one point in time. That was, I'm glad it happened. At the time, man, that was a definite experience, a real wake up call. And the more of my personal conflict stories, my victim stories, my stories of personal disempowerment that I choose to look at and contemplate and rewrite, man, the funnier everything gets, the funnier I get, the more I laugh, the more people around me laugh, the less serious I am. I was a king of serious. I was a king of serious in a bad way. In a bad way. I thought that that was how men conducted themselves, and the martial arts just made it that much worse. I was a serious martial artist, and I walked around that way, and my face reflected it. And guess what else reflected it? Other people back to me. Yeah. So the perspective rules, and smiles help. Smiles help so much. I love smiling now. It's my default program, because the more I smile, talking about making things easier, using architect language easier, the more I smile, the more easy I am with my breath. And the easier I am with my breath, the more relaxed my body is. The more relaxed my body is, the easier it is for me to use my communication skills with myself and other people to help create the kind of realities and environments that I thrive in, which is the exact opposite of the anxiety cycle. And when I was talking to a group of people about this on Saturday, when people deliver information, when they're relaxed and they're breathing into their stomach, it comes across, because it's more matter of fact.
Yeah.
And that carries a very different weight. I'm sure you've had to. I mean, you've been talking to people for years. You've had conversations with people that have been speaking from their chests, from stressed out places, and it's had certain effects on them and yourself. Yeah. And the more that we practice breathing in and delivering our message from our abdomen, whether we're talking about developing corporate cultures, increasing sales, talking to our children, using stories to help us be more harmonious with our partners. I mean, whatever it is, breathing from our stomach is part of the human evolution. It's part of humans' next evolution. There's a tadpole down in South America that, if the conditions are of a certain nature, that tadpole can stay a tadpole and mate with other tadpoles and have baby tadpoles. And if the conditions change, then the thing turns into a salamander, and then it mates with other salamanders. And so it's the same thing with us. It's the same thing with us.
Yeah. Yeah, and we all know those examples of speaking to someone who is stressed or breathing shallow, and we're all so sympathetic. We're all reacting constantly to the energy around us. So if they're feeling that way, you're instantly feeling that way. And now the whole communication is strained, and there's an uncomfortableness. And, I think that's a very key point and a great one for us to kind of end it on. It's like, of course, encouraging everyone to go to procabulary.org and checking out, what you guys have put together. But even just the simplest thing, hey, I'm going to start focusing on deep breathing in all of my interactions in my daily life, just making sure I'm breathing very deeply and then speaking and then interacting. And I think just that simple but profoundly empowering change in your physiology will make it so much easier to then be conscious of what you're saying and what's coming out of your mouth and what's empowering and what's not.
Agreed, 110%, man. That's a arguably the easiest thing that we've talked about in this podcast to focus on and put into practice. Where am I breathing? Because the language, it takes, there's study involved. There's the learning curve involved. Breathing, it's immediate. Where am I breathing? Okay, cool. Well, let me put my breath into my stomach and keep it there for a little bit longer, and then cool, see what happens.
Absolutely. So this has been wonderful, Mark. I appreciate you so much coming on the show, and I certainly would like to circle back around with you and maybe your partner down the road and revisit this, because this is a topic I feel like we could probably go on forever and ever on. One of the last things I'd like to ask is the question I love to put people on the spot with. And so I'll do that now.
Good.
Yeah, something tells me it's not going to intimidate you too much. But in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Mark England?
The meaning of, I'll personalize this, the meaning of my life. The meaning of my life, one of the messages of my life is that what we focus on, that we have a choice, Brandon, that I have a choice, that I can choose to be that serious, overly strict and rigid individual that I was, or I can celebrate, I can laugh, I can move, I can breathe. And whatever we're doing, we're sharing. What do I want to share with people? What do I want to share with my kids? How do I want, okay, well, here's another angle. How do I want to die?
Yeah.
I want to die well. I want to look back and say, I nailed that.
Yeah.
And I know what part of that entails. And part of that entails sharing this message. And you're helping me share this message. Thank you.
Awesome. Very well said. Mark, you said it well at some point in the vocabulary course. You said life is your canvas and words are your paint. And I think that's a very a brilliant statement. And I hope that people, you guys out there listening, take away from this. And Mark, thank you once again. And I look forward to following the success of vocabulary.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you. I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate everyone that's listening to this. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Great. Well, everyone, that concludes our podcast. Mark, thanks again for helping to enlighten myself and the audience on this very important subject of language mastery. And for those of you who want to continue this journey into language mastery, be sure to go to procabulary.org and sign up for the core language upgrade course. And remember to use the promo code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, to get your $50 off. Otherwise, thanks again for joining me on the Positive Head podcast. Until next time, remember, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Be well, everyone.